Richard, you have a really interesting background, and you were the CIO for one of the departments in the city of New York. Tell us a little bit about your background.
I just recently retired from the New York City Human Resources Administration, which is the local Department of Social Services. HRA provides social services to the most neediest New Yorkers. We probably hit about 3 or 4 million of the 8 million plus people in the city with our services. So it's a big agency. But I always knew that I wanted to be of service to people. I had the opportunity after coming out of college and having a short stint in a not-for-profit in getting a job with the city. I took the opportunity to get that job, and it was as a business analyst. But fortunately, I had some very excellent mentors at HRA. The person who hired me was, God rest his soul, was a great person to work for. And he taught me a lot. And the area that he was responsible for was emerging IT in the agency. When I started, we were, the most IT the agency had was a word processing pool. And then I remember the days when we brought in the personal computers, and we started with the floppy disks and everything. So to boot up the computer, it's unbelievable how far it's all come and how so fast. But in any case, I saw the value in IT, and I saw the value to improving our business processes and serving our clients. And I was interested in it. It was new, and I was interested in it, and so I involved myself with it. That's one of the things about working for the city. If you care to do the work or involve yourself, throw yourself into it, they'll accommodate you. So I did that, and over the years I did both small ID departments in the agency and program areas also. So I had gone to the point of being assistant deputy commissioner, again, in charge of a small IT shop and program area. A deputy commissioner position had opened up above me for being over the entire program area. So I put my name in the hat to be considered for that. When I got to the interview with my then commissioner, she saw that I had the IT background, and she said to me, "Why does a technocrat like you want to be in charge of this program area?" And I said, you know, with all due respect, Commissioner, I'm not a technocrat, I'm a manager. And she had a flair for the dramatic, so she slammed her hand down on the desk and she said, well, that's why I need you to be my CIO. And I was going from a small area where we did just a little bit of programming and, you know, to this whole enterprise-wide you know, office that served, like I said, we're in over 100 sites in the city. HRA is about 15,000 strong, and I had a whole data center to run and everything like that. So, but again, it was based on the mentoring that I had and good timing.
So how do you see the role of the CIO?
CIO, definitely as a first tier, they have to meet the basic needs, keep the lights on, make sure that the computers are up and running. We had responsibility for telephony. So all that stuff has to be done. And I think it's important to make sure you take care with that stuff because it helps build relationship with your business partners. If you can show them that you're committed to serving them on that basic level, I think it builds trust. But more importantly than that, I think you use that as a springboard to make sure that CIO knows when to tell the agency what value a particular technology has for that agency and how it can serve the organization. So you have to be able to, as a CIO, identify how a particular, whether it's an emerging technology or something that you already have, how you can bring that to bear on the agency as a whole and demonstrate the value to them. More importantly, though, or another slant to that is the reverse of that. I think a CIO has to be able to say to the CEO who may hear of a buzzword or hear of a new technology and say, hey, let's use this. It's a good idea to use this just because it's new. Have to be able to tell them when it's not good to use a technology and when a technology is not something that you want to adopt or bring in-house. Maybe it's a one-off, maybe you want to contract out for that because you don't want that to become part of your permanent infrastructure because there's not that long-term value in doing it that way. But as a CIO, you have to be able to say both things, when something is of value and how it is of value, and you have to be able to bring that to them. And then the reverse is true. You just can't always be reacting to somebody's desire to use some new technology just because it's new. So you have to be able to provide both those business cases, I think.
Why is it important to really understand the political nature of what's going on in the agency in terms of the role of the CIO?
From my experience and my understanding, and that's why I say it's different of what happens in the private sector, a public sector CIO is really constrained in some ways. There's a lot of oversights that you have to answer to, and additionally, there are an administration comes into power for a limited amount of time. So a public CIO has to be aware of those time constraints, and a public CIO has to be able to navigate the desire of the administration to just focus on those things that they want to get done in the term limit that they have, as opposed to something that goes beyond their time limits because they won't see the value of it. So for instance, we wanted to implement, and I understood the value of implementing an enterprise data warehouse. There was a lot of reasons why I thought that that was important. The administration who was in place at the time saw the time frame that it was going to take to implement that, and they said, what do I care? I don't, I'm not going to benefit from this. Nobody's going to pat me on the back for accomplishing this, so why should I be involved in that? So then the public CIO has to be able to demonstrate to the CEO and the business partners, well, there's a longer term value here. There's an opportunity here, and then you have to try and identify some quick wins. Even if it's just the acknowledgement or something, you have to be able to give them something. And then you have to become a better business partner. I think it's really important for the public CIO to be a good business partner with the business entities, because a lot of times some funding sources will come through those business entities, and you will have the opportunity to leverage those funding sources to do something that's long term. Doing equipment replacement and stuff like that, that's easy for a commissioner to understand. But when you say you want to re-platform a program that's working, that's currently working, currently giving the administration what they want out of it, but you want to go to a new platform because it's old technology and it's harder to get the resources to maintain that application. Again, if you can't make the business case that shows some value to them, some commissioners do get it. Some commissioners will say, okay, I get that. In this instance, I'll invest that money, even though I'm not going to see the value in that. But for the most part, you have to be able to demonstrate how it's going to be of value to them in the short term. So term limits and the political nature of things, I think, is how a public sector CIO differs from a private sector.
One of the challenges today for CIOs is really to help their organizations learn. And I know that you're passionate about all-inclusive learning. So how have you leveraged your philosophy in your role as a CIO? And then maybe you can give us an example or two.
Look, I think that learning is critical for a lot of different reasons, but inclusive learning for me is defined in two ways. One is for the staff members themselves. I think it's important for, especially in the area of technology where things change so rapidly, it's important for staff to be kept as current as they can be on the emerging technologies and development or enhancements to existing technologies and how that might benefit them. I was able to, in my position, because I had some wonderful staff, senior staff that had been there for a while, who would take the time to tutor and mentor younger staff. A lot of times, for instance, a lot of ways that staff may advance within the city is through civil service exams. So I had staff, senior staff, who would, when a civil service exam came available, they would, on their own time, get groups of younger staff together, if you will, and tutor them on how to pass this test, on what skill sets that were needed to pass these tests. And that helped those people advance in the organization. So that type of learning from the seasoned veterans to the rookies, if you will, I think was very valuable. And it built camaraderie too. So secondly to that, inclusive learning, I think, also includes conversation across the departments within IT. It was very easy for my programming staff to say, well, we can't get this done because I don't have enough resources from the infrastructure side. It's easy for the security people to say, you have to have this application done in a certain way to the programmers, which would make it impossible from the programmer's perspective to develop an efficient application that's going to be of practical use for their end user. So what I did was I developed this community of practice committee, and I had representative people from each of those areas get together regularly to discuss what were some of the problems across the departments and what were some of the problems inherent in some of the projects we were trying to make progress on. By doing that and by empowering these people to offer solutions on those issues, we did two things. First of all, the staff they became educated into the issues across the program areas. So the programmers understood that, hey, wait a second, if I write this in a certain way, it's not going to be as efficient, and I'm going to be a resource hog, and that's going to impact the infrastructure side. And the infrastructure side could appreciate, or the security people could appreciate, that an application had to, be able to meet certain milestones to be acceptable to the user. So, so it was those cross communications where I think the different departments gained an appreciation for what their objectives and what they had to do. And then I think that it also empowered people to build better relationships across the organization and made them all feel like they were a part of the solution. So that's what I think about when I think about inclusive learning, Phil.
What do you think, based on your experience of being a CIO and knowing other CIOs, are successful characteristics?
A CIO has to be decisive, and a CIO has to understand that the people as individuals matter in a lot of different ways. Being decisive means being able to take responsibility for what happens, being able to at some point pull the trigger on something. You can get lost in paralysis analysis. I try and be inclusive and have people give input, but at some point you have to make a decision, and you have to let the organization know that you're willing to make that decision. More importantly, you have to let your staff know that, listen, although I've listened to you and I've heard what you said, I'm making this decision for my reasons. And admit when you're wrong and be flexible about that. There's value, and that's why that characteristic is important. The other part of that, in terms of understanding the value of people, I know that I'm not going to get anything done unless the people that report to me can execute on things. They have to feel empowered, and they have to feel that I have their back. It's tough sometimes when you get a manager who looks to just make a name for themselves, whose motivations aren't as pure in the sense of just being able to serve as they should be, in my opinion. I've struggled sometimes with managers who were technically excellent, but when the time came to work with their business partners, they wanted to force a solution down their throat. They didn't see the value, or play the blame game and say, well, this didn't work because they did something. They didn't train, they didn't implement in time. And I would have to work with those people, though, and tell them, listen, that's not forging a good business relationship. You have to understand that everybody, for the most part, is geared towards the same objective, to get the solution done. But I think, as far as a characteristic goes, taking the time to develop those skills in a person and recognizing a person's weaknesses and strengths is an important part of being a CIO.
What are some of the areas where you've applied innovation and it's been successful in your role as CIO? So
the public sector is a little bit different in that we are a little slow in the uptake sometimes of technology. It's hard for us to jump in for a lot of different reasons: oversights, budgeting, people adverse to risk. So sometimes we're a little bit slow on the uptake, but innovation is important. Now, one small example of innovation at HRA was an iPad application. There was funds available throughout the city for any agency that wanted to seize the opportunity to use an iPad as part of their solution in an application. We leveraged it in our adult protective services area. Adult protective services is responsible for the care, in a very general way, for the care of elderly citizens who can't care for themselves, have nobody else to care for them, can't manage their money and stuff like that. One of the things that Adult Protective Services has to do is go out and inspect the living conditions of these people that we serve. It was a very manual and paper-intensive operation. We'd have to send field workers out to with a camera and paper, and they'd go through this checklist, and then they'd come back, and after these assessments, manually data enter that into our central system and stuff like that. What we did innovatively was we took the iPad and we were able to have the application right there available. Mm-hmm. So it was one-time data entering. We could use the iPad to take the picture, so it wasn't, multiple pieces of equipment that we had to have out there, and there was the input was instantaneous. So that was one innovation that we did. Another innovation that we did was we leveraged voice over IP. I justified the implementation of voice over IP to the city by the amount of money that we would save in telephony costs. And that in itself, as a business case, was enough to get the project started. And we've implemented and we saved millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars really, and that money will be saved in perpetuity, so it was a great thing. But that wasn't the necessarily innovative part of it. We're leveraging that now, the digital telephony, if you will, for integrating into our voicemail and email. We can now set up call centers on the fly if we need to, something we had to do in Sandy Storm and things like that. So I think that innovation was another important thing that we accomplished at HRA.
What is your leadership style, and how has it evolved over the years?
My leadership style is, first of all, I acknowledge that I am not, nor do I need to be, the smartest person in the room. I have a lot of talented people working for me, and it was always good to tap those resources. I think it's also important to, as part of my style, to acknowledge the work that people have done. It's an old adage to praise in public and criticize in private, and I think that that's a timeless adage, and I think it's important to be able to do that. My staff was excellent staff, and very good to me and dedicated, and builds that kind of trust. So then the third thing is that I think that my leadership style is that I have an open door policy. At HRA, I had over 800 staff, included consultant staff, but I had over 800 staff, and I let each of those staff members know, and I reminded them that any time they wanted to come and talk to me about anything, whether it was professional, even personal, my door was open to them and available to them. I think that served me and them in a lot of ways. First of all, it builds a community of trust, I think. Second of all, it establishes with my staff that I have their back. I'm there to support them. And so having that characteristic as part of my leadership style served me well. In
terms of leadership, what do you think makes a good leader?
Well, I think it's important that a leader demonstrate their willingness to take responsibility. And, as we said earlier, to be decisive. At some point, your organization wants to know that they can trust you in making decisions. So I would recommend that somebody know that would demonstrate to their organization that they know how to take responsibility for things. I think that it's important that they forge good business relationships. I'm not that sure about the private sector, but I know in the city, not just in HRA, but across the city, it was always critical to be able to know who you could call. In a bigger bureaucracy, that's important. You can get lost in paperwork, and I would tell a public CIO that you should build good, and that should be part of your leadership in building good business relationships, not just within your organization, but across the organization.
How do you locate the right people to fill the slots that you need in your organization?
Well, hiring is critical, and especially in an IT organization within the city, I think, because you don't get a lot of opportunity to make new hires. I mean, you get some over the years, obviously, through attritions and stuff like that. But so it's critical that you don't take for granted the opportunity to hire somebody. Now, what I like to try and do, first of all, is promote from within. If there's somebody there who demonstrates the ability and the desire to do more and take on more responsibility and learn something new, I will always try and hire from within first. Beyond that, I will even expand to the agency as a whole. Sometimes there's somebody in the program areas who has a desire to be involved with IT. Maybe they're just a business analyst right now. Maybe they want to get more involved in testing or even programming or something like that. I've had that happen to me over the years. So I will always keep my eye out for somebody who's good in the program areas who wants to make the transition over to IT. Beyond that, one of the good things that we have is, I mentioned before, I have a very big consultant staff. I mean, it's big in terms of its numbers. It's almost 200 people. It's small with regard to the overall number that we have at HRA of civil servants, but in any case, the consultants provide us, the consultant paradigm provides us an excellent opportunity to hire the right resource. We get to test drive somebody, if you will, as a consultant. The consultant positions are not bound in the same way civil servant titles are in terms of the rules for when you can dismiss a civil servant or even discipline somebody. And they seem younger class of people coming through the consultant ranks. So because I have good relationships with my consultant companies, I can test drive these people and then have them make the transition when the opportunity, if they want to, make the transition over. Usually they do because it provides them with a number of benefits being a civil servant, like health care and stuff like that. It gives them a more stable environment. And for us, we get a tested resource. So those three things are the way that we look to hire people. Beyond that, we will go to different, electronic community bulletin boards and stuff like that, and try and find that diamond in the rough, because a lot of times a civil service position isn't going to pay what somebody realizes that they can get, right, coming out of school or something like that, or having a certain skill set. It's hard for us to get, administrators who satisfy our technical needs, but will be okay with the starting salary that we're going to give them. So we'll take a chance on them, they'll take a chance on us. And then over the years, that builds loyalty, and they progress and they learn. And so, but that's how I've handled the hiring process.
What are the characteristics that you're looking for in the ideal candidate?
As a very basic requirement is that they have the skill set that I'm looking for. They have the basic knowledge of the skill set that I'm looking for. Beyond that, though, I look for somebody who does two things. Communicates well, can present himself well to me, can explain what they're, what the point they're trying to get across to me, and seems like they'll be a good communicator to their business partners. Mm-hmm. I think that that's a critical characteristic to hire somebody. And then the other thing that I look for is I'm looking for somebody who is willing to take on responsibility, who has demonstrated maybe in some personal thing that they've overcome, some issue that they've overcome, or some professional problems that they've overcome, that they took responsibility for the issue, and that they were able to have the stick-to-itiveness of it, if you will, to get through that process, to overcome that issue. I think that speaks to their character, and I think that that's somebody that I want as part of my team.
What have you done to build the right culture in your organization?
Yeah, Phil, I think that it's important for anybody who's trying to build a culture to walk the walk. You have to be able to demonstrate to people that the things that you say are the things that you're willing to do. Just one small example. I always told my staff, and I always tried to demonstrate to my staff, that they came first. That their issues, and it was my job to make sure that their issues were addressed. I think that over the years, that built loyalty, it built a sense of responsibility and stuff like that. But one small example of that was Superstorm Sandy. In Superstorm Sandy, our headquarter offices down at 180 Water Street were put underwater and were out of commission for about 4 months. The executive staff from there came over to the IT shop and basically commandeered the IT shop because they needed a place to operate. I asked my staff to vacate their offices for those senior staff. And I did it myself. And that's what I talk about walking the walk. I refused to go back into my office until such time as all of my staff had their offices back. It was a small thing for me to do, but I think that it demonstrated to my staff that I do put them first, and that this is the way that I am committed to them. Their response in Superstorm Sandy, they did a yeoman's job, a heroic effort, in not only dealing with what had to be done in HRA, but in being an aid to the city in general, in the city's response to, and they had to do it on the fly. And people were asked to do impossible things in terms of the number of hours they had to work, or sleep over someplace, or be at someplace at 7 in the morning, even though there was no subway station that went there anymore. And they had to use their own personal transportation, and the gas lines were long. But they did all of those things, not just because they were good people, but I believe because I built that culture with them. Second to that, Phil, is the idea, I think it's important to recognize, again, and communicate and build a relationship with the people. I had a very diverse organization, and I thought it was important to embrace their particular cultures. I was always sensitive and acknowledged the need for Sabbath observers to leave, and we worked all of that out. We celebrated Diwali, which is an Indian Hindu celebration. I would speak to my staff who were involved in Ramadan, and we'd have a Chinese New Year celebration every year. So all those things, and continually doing those things throughout the year, forged good relationships, and I think it gave people an appreciation that, you know what, we really are all here together doing this. But you do that, you build that by actually showing the behavior. It's easy to say something, but I think it's important to demonstrate that through your actions.
What advice would you give to other CIOs who want to pursue a career in public service?
There's a lot of value that you get out of it, but so I would encourage people to do it. But the thing that I would say to them is this: let your organization know that you're willing to take responsibility. Let your organization know that you're willing to be decisive about something, and that you will take responsibility for what happens and things that you have to do to change or mitigate any mistakes that happen or something like that. So I think that that's critical. I would also tell them to be aware of the other entities, especially in the public service, where there's so much bureaucracy, and you have to be sensitive to the other areas that have what you might consider a marginal reporting relationship with you, but are critical in terms of you getting things done. So I would encourage a public CIO to for instance, know what the finance office, what they need to get their process done, and make sure that they respect that process in their time frame for getting things done. Because it's horrible, and it's happened, but and that's how you learn things, but it's horrible that you go through a whole process and then you realize that, wait a second, I was supposed to be at finance 3 months ago doing this process that they need done that takes 3 months. Likewise, I would tell them to be sensitive about the legal requirements. There are a lot of legal restrictions that they may be unaware of. So you should make sure you build good relationships with those departments and be sensitive. I would also tell them to be a good business partner. I would try and go out of my way to look for opportunities to make my business partners happy. Sometimes it was just something as simple as giving them an upgrade on a device that they had. Sometimes it was going the extra mile for them, or being discreet about something. But I thought that was important because I knew sooner or later that I was going to need them. Nobody can do everything, and especially in a public entity where there's oversights and there's different things brought to bear on a decision about how to move forward on something. So building that credibility with those people gave me some credibility to go back to them later on and say, hey, I need this. This is why I'm doing this. The other thing I would tell any CIO actually is not to panic. Things happen all the time, and in the area of IT, things can be critical, especially if it's a security breach or something like that. But the thing is, there's no value in panicking. Panic has never served anybody, as far as I know. So don't panic. Stay focused on what you have to do. After you're past the initial crisis, then do an assessment as to what happened and why, and take the steps to mitigate those things for later on. But don't panic. be fearless and be focused.